What's your craziest, I need to quit this job immediately story? Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for the support. Wildlife rehabber in Iceland. There are these birds called fulmars that are the bane of my existence. I haven't quit yet, but every time I have to deal with them, I reconsider my life choices. When they get upset, they puke all over you. They can rapid fire it multiple times. They eat only fish, and it's a defensive mechanism, so it's also mixed with this oil that makes it cling. If a drop gets on you, stink for 3 days. Next story. When I was 18, I got a job selling vacuums. Pay was amazing. The ad made it sound like we were going to be selling them in a store. Went in for orientation, and there were 20 other people there. All guys. I was the only girl. And the leader spent most of the time talking about his fancy car and how he made so much money and got all the girls. Then we were told we would be selling door to door, by ourselves, using our own vehicles and our own gas. And it was pure commission. I said no thanks. They called me back 3 times trying to convince me to sell their vacuums. Next story. I worked at an gynecological office, and they wanted me to wash speculums with dish soap. No disinfectant was in that office at all. Then I'd be with a different patient getting them ready for the doctor, and the doctor would then be in the hall screaming, "Nurse! Nurse! Nurse!" Like we weren't a large office, 3 of us total. You couldn't remember my name? And also, why are we screaming nurse like that when I'm with a patient? It's so rude. Needless to say, I walked out 3 days after and never went back. I reported the office to the state too. Next story. I lost my job as a waitress around the pandemic time and got a job assisting with horse husbandry, breeding instead. Yeah, that was a mistake. I guess I had pictured something a little more romantic, and I can deal with shoveling, but it's an absolutely vile job. Having to collect semen samples from stallions, checking mare vulvas to see if they're in heat. They discharge goopy stuff often when they were, that we'd often use to help entice the stallions. The worst was with the geldings in the stable though, regularly having to clean their sheaths, where you have to manually go in with your hand and clean out all the smegma that builds up around their junk. There's tons of it, and it often hardens into huge oily chunks called beans. I didn't last long. Next story. When I was called into the supervisor's office a few days before the end of my probationary period and got a lecture about him being concerned that I didn't get along with the guys and that it's not too late to resign, I stupidly didn't take the hint and was terminated the last day of my probation period for not being a good fit. With regards of not getting along with the guys, I didn't bother anyone and kept to myself after giving up trying to talk to them and just being insulted and excluded. This wasn't blue-collar busting balls. This was like some high school bullying, like, "Don't talk to us, loser," type crap. Basically adult high school jocks with that cool kid group think. Next story. The interview process was very sketchy, all on Zoom, interviewing multiple people at once. They wouldn't directly state what you did at the job, got hired suspiciously quick without properly meeting anyone. Did some research. Turns out I accidentally applied to a devil corporation, so I ghosted orientation. They didn't even message me after, which was the final red flag. Next story. I used to work at a vape shop years ago. We'd make our own juice, sell vapes, regular stuff. One day the boss overheard me talking to a customer and took me aside after in his office. Told me I did a great job. However, I need to watch the way I say things. I was super confused because the lady seemed happy and I thought it had went well. He went on to say. I ended the conversation with, "No problem, have a good day." In his words, no problem is negative, and it's not an appropriate way to end the conversation, since now it can be perceived that it was in fact a problem I didn't want to have to handle. Shortly after this, he told me it was okay to serve certain minors, as their parents came in and told me they'd rather their kid vape than smoke. I handed in my resignation shortly after. Next story. Got hired at a 24-hour daycare. I was hired for second shift. My second day, they left me alone to do a shift. Babies that I had no clue their names. Boxes with kid names that had EpiPens in them, but no idea what they were allergic to, or who they even were. To pick up the kids. People just knock on the door and get the kids. No clearance on who they are. No idea if kids are going to the right place. After day 3, I quit, left my key, and just didn't show up. Next story. Nothing nefarious, but I quit a zookeeping internship on day 3 because I just couldn't make myself clean up tiger lion dung without puking everywhere. First time they made me go into their night house to clean in the morning, I felt sicker than I ever had in my life. Lion spray everywhere, enormous piles of crap scattering the floor. I tried to hold my breath, shovel a bit, and run out before I had to inhale, but it was not sustainable, and I had to go sit down with a garbage can for a bit. They got frustrated and kept assigning me to do it each day and said, "Stop running out, just stay in till you get used to it." But I just couldn't. Next story. I was talking a friend through a breakup with her toxic ex. Realized everything I said to her could be applied to me with my boss. Isn't realize it was abusive because it wasn't romantic. Put my notice in the following Monday. Next story. I worked for a mental health agency that primarily saw court-mandated clients for substance abuse. I was doing assessments, and my supervisor came to me and said, "You recommended outpatient, 6 hours a week, when the client needs intensive outpatient, 9 hours. I argued with her at length about how that higher level isn't appropriate, given their patterns of use, supports, etc. Finally, she said, "If you're doing assessments, your job is to fill seats in the program, so either you move them to the higher level, or I will." I realized that not only is that blatant insurance fraud I could lose my license for, but we had completely lost the plot at helping folks recover. I quit right then and there. Next story. Went in for an interview for a dishwasher job. They asked me to work. Spent the whole night getting yelled at for not being fast enough. End of the night, everyone disappeared but one cook who told me they were supposed to clean up, but everyone left and he had to go, so it was on me. I just left. Got a call the next day yelling at me, saying I had no work ethic, and if I didn't come back, I wasn't getting paid. I said keep it. Next story. I was in high school and got hired at Burger King. I had a brief training that was only watching videos. I was then thrown into making burgers alone. Day 1. Needless to say, I was very slow and couldn't keep up with orders. The manager was a lazy jerk that only watched and ordered everyone around and never jumped in to help. After about an hour, the manager yelled at me that I was too slow, so I told her, "Do it your damn self," and left. Next story. First day working with after-fire cleanup crew. Working with the boss, and while moving a mattress, he starts to fall backward out of the 3rd-story window. I step on mattress and grab him at the last second. He spends the rest of the day screaming at me about putting a footprint on the mattress. I never returned. Next story. I showed up, and the owner didn't. Waited about a half hour, called, went to another office in the building, and borrowed a paper and pen to write an "I quit" note to slide under the door. The job sucked, and it was sketchy. Cold calling people to see if they would let our salespeople come to their house and sell them fancy vacuums. I was glad to be gone. A month goes by, and still no final paycheck. He tells me to stop by and I can grab it. No big deal. My dad gives me a ride and waits outside. I go upstairs and he's holding a mass interview event. There's about 15 to 20 people there. Now, when it comes to my dad, you don't mess around with his or my money or his time. This jackass makes me sit there for a while, and sure enough, my dad comes up and asks what the problem is. He won't see me yet. He knows I'm here and why, but he just keeps doing the interviews. He told me to come for this day. Why, I don't know. My dad storms into the interview rooms and loses on it the guy. He wasted my time by not showing up. He hasn't paid me, and now he's pulling this crap? A few moments later, my dad comes out with my money and warns everyone there that this guy is a scam and will screw you over. We leave. A few people follow. A month later, I needed a reference for a job. I figured, why not just ask? Sure enough, he said, "Sure, you are great. It's not your fault your dad is a damn psycho." He gave me a glowing reference, and I got the job. Next story. Joined a startup that was pre-revenue, but post-product market fit according to the pitch deck. 3 weeks in, the founder mentioned the runway was 4 to 6 months depending on the exchange rate. He then booked himself a business class ticket to a conference in the US while the team was on reduced salaries. Had an offer letter from my next job before he landed. Next story. Worked temp staffing at a lumberyard for a week. Min-wage water was not drinkable on site. I was paired up with Forrest Gump's Bubba, who was recently out of jail for nearly beating someone to death from his hair-trigger anger issues, and gave me an education in everything jail-related, against my will, over 100 degrees that week. Busted my ass slinging endless pallets of zip-tied wood. Temp staffing couldn't figure out why no one would work at the mill. Next story. Finding out that the company was paying for the CEO's mistress's apartment was the tipping point. His wife sobbing to me in the bathroom about the affair certainly didn't help, nor did him showing up to work with substances residue on his face. Next story. Working at McD, went into the women's handicap stall, and there was male ejaculate down the wall and very clear sweat handprints on the wall where they stood and braced themselves. I told one of the managers and was asked how I knew that's what it was. I explained, I knew because I worked at an adult store when I was 20, and there was an arcade that I had to clean, so I knew what that looked like on a wall. She took pictures and sent it out to all managers. Came in the next day and it was still there. Went and talked to a maintenance guy, and they basically told me they don't clean the women's bathroom because a woman might come in. Had 4 days off and came back and it was still there. Went and talked to the head maintenance man, and he was angry asking me how I knew. So I had to explain that embarrassing crap again, and they were mad at me for the situation. I guess because I wouldn't let it go? Took a week to clean. Next story. This was the fastest I quit a job. When my manager told me I'm not allowed to do something, even though my other coworkers do it, and we're in the same position, I told myself that I need to leave. After my previous job closed down, I was looking for part-time jobs as a college student, and my mother recommended that I work at a nearby Chipotle because they cover some of your tuition. I think the reason why I got hired was because my manager went to my previous job's location before we closed, saw me, and asked if I wanted to work at Chipotle, but I apparently told him no. I don't even remember encountering him there. After working there for a few weeks, I saw one of my coworkers, who was the chef, get his food himself while on his break. So later that day, after I clocked out, I followed the safety procedures and began getting my food with the correct portions. My manager came out and said I couldn't get my food myself because no one was on the line to do it for me. A few days later, a coworker who usually does mobile orders went on her break, and as she was getting her food, our manager was there, and he didn't say a word to her. He doesn't even follow that rule himself. This was only the general manager. The on-duty managers weren't bothered by us getting our employee meals, as long as we got the correct portions and entered the correct information into the register. Something that disgusted me was the amount of cross-contamination on the line. When a customer orders the carnitas, pork, the juices of it would drip into the other items. Also, they use one thermometer for all the ingredients, and after taking the temperature of each item, they just wipe the thermometer with a piece of paper or a wet rag without changing the side of the paper or rag after each wipe. The only thing I like about Chipotle is their tractor beverages. I found a job at a retail store and put my 2-week notice in for Chipotle. However, on a day I was scheduled for training at the new job, I was scheduled at Chipotle, so I just didn't show up at Chipotle and ignored my manager's calls, then blocked his number. The main reason why I was probably mistreated was that I didn't have much in common with the workers and manager there. I wasn't disrespectful to anyone and did my job. The majority of them are Spanish speakers, so being unable to speak a language many of them speak, other than English, can be seen as to why I was probably treated differently. Next story. Not particularly crazy, but a new manager started while I was on maternity leave. She was already the manager at another department and was assigned to mine. So she knew me, but we haven't worked together before. By contract, my salary negotiation was supposed to be held while I was on leave. When I came back to work, I had to ask for a salary negotiation myself because nobody would even mention it to me. And the manager said, "Well, I don't know how you work, so I am not going to give you a salary increase for at least a year, not even an inflation adjustment." I decided right there that it was time for me to go, found a much better paying job shortly after. Next story. I worked a job where the production system broke so often that we had a daily recovery routine, more stable than the actual system. One day I asked why we don't just fix the root problem. Manager said it's not in the roadmap. That was the roadmap for me to leave. Next story. I did my PhD in the US and moved to Germany to do a postdoc. I established some elegant experiments that worked, but the results weren't groundbreaking and didn't align with my professor's previous papers, but aligned with the rest of the field. My boss walked into my office and told me to add some numbers to make the data appear significant. A director of clinical chemistry, and he had been falsifying data for his whole career. When I discussed it with a colleague whom I trusted, she said, "Yeah, all of our big papers have something fake in them. It's just how it is." Absolutely crazy for me to see someone in such a prestigious position have a whole career based on fake data. Even crazier? When we turned in a whole folder of data showing how he faked everything, and there were 4 witnesses all backing each other up, the university did, Nothing at all. Next story. Worked at the Seattle Space Needle doing security. The job posting, description, interview process made it seem like you would be doing all these different things. In reality, all you did was walk through the bottom of the building once an hour or stand on a walking ramp. They also conveniently forgot to say I might have to work some weekends. I quit the same day I started after confronting the manager. Next story. Workplace found my Reddit account. I'd posted a cosplay selfie, printed out my comments, and circled all the potty words they wanted me to delete from past comments. 'Cause if they could find it, someone else could find it and recognize me as an employee, and cursing would reflect poorly on them. Yeah, bye. Quit the next day. Next story. In my early 20s, my dad got me a job at the hospital. He'd worked there his entire career, my uncle and aunt too. I was a ward attendant, so my job was to help the nurses. Show up first day, zero training, and was told I had to special an old guy. He had dementia and was regularly violent. I got punched, kicked, spat at, and called all sorts of names first day. Second day, I was on ward duty. Got a call from a nurse to help dress a patient. I go in and am immediately hit by the smell. Guy had crapped himself, then used it to paint the wall. My job was to hold him down while they cleaned the poop from him, then clean the walls after. Third day, I was assigned to help feed patients. A lot of patients had strict diets, but I was told the catering staff knew, and I was just to feed them what was on the tray. So I'm feeding this lady. We're having a nice conversation, and all of a sudden she starts turning purple. I yell for a nurse, but there's none around. This lady went down, passed out, not breathing. I ran out and found a nurse, but by the time we got back, she'd passed. Resigned the next day. Next story. I took a temp job at a factory that assembles tools. I was assigned to a station where screwdriver blades were inserted into the handles. It had a large hammer that moved back and forth at a steady pace. I had to shove a handle into a slot, then quickly slide the blade in while the hammer was pulled back. About 1 second. If I got it right, it would hammer the blade into the handle. If not, the blade would fly across the room at high speed. The job started at 6 a.m. and everyone took 15 minutes of lunch together. The place was filthy, literally and metaphorically. There was adult film hanging everywhere. The part of my station that moved back and forth had a card with a naked woman on it, and some guy told me, "Put a dildo on that thing and it'd drive a woman crazy," with a maniacal laugh. I tried to quit after 4 hours, but they convinced me to ride out the week, 3 days. Next story. I was a part of a team who started a new service desk in an HP building in Ottawa. We were servicing a large telco client's employees, not customers. After about a year, we had everything down well. Well, they decided to put the contract up to local service desk providers for new management. The one I worked for did not win the bid, but they wanted to retain all current employees, experience, processes, etc. We were brought in for one-on-one meetings. Essentially, we were told that the very minor pay and small amount of vacations that we had, well, the vacation time would be cut effectively immediately in half, and there would be a small pay drop. We quickly got together in pairs and threatened to quit. We won't continue without our existing pay, vacation. They actually agreed. I quit anyways because the future of that place would be horrible. That company was known around town and hated by its employees. Next story. Nothing too crazy really happened. Just a long time coming really. But I seriously thought I was going to have a mental break one day, which I had never felt before, and I quit right on the spot. I didn't tell anyone though. Just went back in from break, signed out, and walked out with no plan. Took them 4 days to call me. Felt crazy to me. Next story. Still work this job. Sent on a flight for a work trip. Flight was delayed. In total across both flights and the layover, 12 hours. Taking 18 hours total to get there instead of 6. Because those hours fell outside of my office's hours, I was not paid for my trouble. If they had, I could have clocked them. The trip was only 2 days, and I lost a day of active work time due to the travel delays and needing sleep. Next story. I had to pick up used condoms and dead squirrels in our parking lot. I worked at a family-owned wealth management firm, and it was the worst 6 months of my life. No training, my computer and other tech equipment weren't set up when I came in. They told me to watch videos and figure it out. That was the vibe there. I was it, HR, admin, marketing, estates, and dead squirrel and condom wrangler. For some reason, people liked hooking up in our parking lot after hours, and the squirrels would die after our pest control guy sprayed. I was also commuting an hour and a half each way for this job, because it was the most I had ever been paid and thought it would be a good opportunity. Not a single thing about this job was worth all that struggle. The building was an old house, and our AC would constantly break, and I would have to vacuum built-up water out of the drain pipe on the side of the building in my high heels and pencil skirt in the heat of the Florida summer. I could truly go on and on about how bad the experience was. I'm much happier now working a software remote job. I feel like I survived war. Next story. Yeah, you 100% dodged a bullet there. Real jobs are annoying and slow as hell to hire. Not mystery position on Zoom, you're in, no questions. If they can't explain what you'll be doing and don't care that you no-call, no-show day one, they were planning to use you, not employ you. Next story. I remember I had this coworker who'd been there a while, wasn't even a proper manager, always boss me around and say trash to me. The final straw was when we were in the middle of a dinner rush, and I had my phone go off, and it was distracting, so I took a minute to pull it out, check the notification, and silence it. Dude was absolutely enraged that I was on my phone during work, and tried to confiscate it like I was a child in school. I brought this up to higher-ups, but they still kept him around because he was good at his job despite that, along with the fact that he would say inappropriate crap to all the women there as well. Next story. A few years ago, I worked for a hospice program. While I was the lone social worker on the team, all my fellow coworkers were nurses with advanced degrees. All of them were lovely, except my boss. She had a strict policy about showing up to work even if you were sick. No excuses. Because being around dying people while you're sick is a good idea, right? Sarcasm. I got COVID for a 4th time, and for the weeks afterward, I had multiple hypertensive crises, a constant high-grade fever, vomiting, and fainting spells related to sudden increases or decreases of my heart rate, among other miseries. My coworkers were gravely concerned for me and even insisted on taking my blood pressure several times throughout the day, but my boss would literally watch me faint, vomit, or see my high blood pressure results and tell me to go to the ER on my own time. One workday, I ended up in the ER, had to stay in the hospital overnight, and had to get a spinal tap while there. It is highly recommended after a spinal tap, you lay flat on your back for 1 to 2 days following the procedure. And her being a nurse would have known this, but of course she insisted I come to work, or else. HR was aware of some of this and overruled her that I could take the recommended days off. My boss proceeded to send me nasty text messages the entire time. So on day 3, I came to work, showed up at our morning meeting, blew my lid, and quit on the spot in front of my entire team. I heard she was fired shortly after this, partly due to the lengthy exit interview, written statement, and text message proof I provided HR upon leaving. Next story. I have one. I had accepted a full-time offer at a weapons manufacturer before my current job, and the pay was so lucrative. I had the same base pay as my current job, but with a 30% bonus. I couldn't do it though, and only lasted 3 days. During that time, both the vice president of marketing and a senior associate partner made advances toward me on 2 separate occasions. The vice president was the worst out of the 2. He called me into his office to discuss comments I had made about his travel expenses, and as he shut the door, he slapped my ass. Overall, extremely uncomfortable work environment. Very conservative, heavily ex-military, and people openly joked about wanting more war and very pro-Trump views. Next story. I have a lot, but I'll do this one, RN. One time I took a crappy warehouse job in the town next door, and I quit during orientation. The lady presenting it seemed crazy, and their slideshow made almost no sense at all. Only myself and one girl in the classroom seemed to notice it. Also, the pay turned out to be lower than advertised, of course. At one point, it talked about raises, and they had some formula for that. I plugged in some numbers to the formula, and so did that chick. We noticed the numbers didn't add up how the lady said, and was the equivalent of no raise until after like 9 to 10 years. The girl tried to raise her hand about it. Lady ignored it. As soon as the slideshow ended for lunch, me and that girl both simultaneously got up and left the room. Out in the parking lot, me and that chick were both walking to our vehicles and laughing about how stupid the slideshow was. And she was like, "Have you ever quit a job that fast before?" And I was like, "No, this is the record so far." And she was like, "Yeah, me too." Next story. I was 16 and in my senior year in high school. I was thinking of going into advertising in university and was trying to find jobs in the field that I could do to look good on my application. I found one place that asked after my first interview to arrive at the second one in business clothes. So the morning of, I put on my ill-fitting suit and most uncomfortable shoes and headed out. Turned out it was a job selling coupons door to door. Coupons for a local paintball field. That was bad enough, the bait and switch. But they wanted me to go out and try it, saying they'll pay me for my work. I agreed, was saving money to go on a trip after graduation, but with reservation. They paired me up with some guy in his 20s, sent us out to the suburbs, and off we went. It actually wasn't that bad, the job itself. Pretty chill, and the guy I was with seemed friendly enough, but was really pushy at people's doors. I didn't much like that, but one house made me bail. We knock, this old lady, in her 60s or 70s or so, answered the door, dressed really formally, full makeup, and it was pretty clear she'd been crying. She also seemed really distracted and distant, and didn't really understand why we were there. After the guy does his spiel, she says, "I'm sorry, I don't really understand. My son just died, and we're going to his funeral." This idiot. He says, "Oh, do you have any grandkids? I bet they'd love to go play paintball." I, a mild-mannered shy teenager, basically grabbed this dude's shoulder, spun him around, and told the lady, "I'm so sorry we bothered you," and pulled the door shut. The guy freaked out on me. I called him an asshole and walked to the nearest train station, which was like 8 kilometers away. Damn that guy. Next story. Walked in, thermostat said 117. Hood vents were broken. I told the dumb owner we cannot legally be open. He insisted on staying open. I said nope and called the fire marshal. Just one way to quit. Next story. I'm a welder by trade, and years ago I took a position through a temporary staffing agency at a factory. After working there for a couple of months and doing great, my supervisor introduced me to a new hire who had been brought on directly by the company as a welder. He asked me to train him. I learned that this new guy was earning at least $6 per hour more than I was, and also had full benefits. Despite that, I demonstrated the work by running a few parts while he watched, then had him try it himself. It quickly became self-evident that he had no welding experience at all. He was holding the gun more than a foot away from the workpiece and couldn't even maintain an arc, let alone lay a bead. I went back to the supervisor and asked whether the new hire had been weld tested before being brought on, and I explained that he appeared to have no welding experience whatsoever. The supervisor simply told me to show him how to weld. I told him that the company had hired this guy as a welder, yet he lacked any of the skills. I also pointed out that I had completed 2 years of formal training to learn my trade, and if I was now expected to train others, I needed a raise or to be hired on directly. The supervisor said he couldn't do that, so I told him that I was not going to train someone earning more than me for a job they were hired to already know how to do. I walked off the job and never looked back. Next story. Applied at Chuck E. Cheese while I was in high school. Interviews seemed to go well, and the manager said he would give me a call to let me know after he did a few more interviews. Never hear from him? Oh well, life goes on. Next week at school, one of my classmates that also interviewed told me that the manager was asking where the hell I was, as the previous night was my first shift. He called me a couple days later to fire me, and I informed him he never called me, nor left a message to offer me the job, and I never accepted. So he could kiss my ass. Next story. At my previous job that my doctor referred to as a toxic workplace, my final straw was when my boss told me that I needed to CC her and the new girl who was starting in a few weeks. She was returning after leaving 18 months prior, but somehow already outranked me. I didn't come back after that. Happier now, and I live rent-free in their heads. Next story. My first job as a lawyer, the owner. My boss used to handwrite checks instead of doing direct deposit. I assumed to save money. My bank app, ATMS, couldn't even recognize the writing, so you literally had to deposit every check the old-fashioned way. I let my supervisors know I was going to drive home the day before Thanksgiving in the afternoon, which also happened to be payday. We usually got our checks around noon. It was 1 p.m., and I asked him if I could get my paycheck so I could hit the road on time. Surprise! We were all grossly underpaid. He looks at me and brings me out in front of the entire office and says, "You're not my damn pimp. I pay you when I want to pay you. Don't ever do that again. This may be the city of brotherly love, but I will mess you up if that crap happens again." Got the check at 3 p.m. and ended up behind a car that flipped over on the highway because of all the snow, and barely got any time with my family. Next story. I was a liquidation broker. We sold truckloads of liquidated merchandise, Long story as short as possible, owner came in with a huge bag of substances and 2 escort and started saying we were going to turn the company into a secret brothel. To add some context, the owner was an addict who spent all of our money that customers paid us for truckloads and freight, on a contract for truckloads and 20,000 of substances. And as we are sitting in the office trying to figure out how to help our clients, that's when he came in with the BS. I could write a short book about that company. It was insane. After the owner did that, we all quit and started a new company. Built the foundation in my buddy's living room. Then we started to get death threats from our previous boss because we took his business. He even sent people to drive by and point guns at us. I'd do it again though. I was making a ridiculous amount of money. Next story. A waitress asked me to get something out for the freezer for her, and I got locked me in there for a couple hours, and the owner pulled a shotgun on me, accused me of stealing time by hiding in the freezer. Next story. Toy designer. I found my forged signature on tests for toxic dyed. I confronted management. I matched the handwriting to one of them. I packed and left that morning. Fast forward 4 years later, I got to testify to that story, complete with copies of the forgery. Next story. Was doing contract work, and the business owner wanted to meet with me outside a donut shop. It was pouring rain, and I pulled up in front of his vehicle and waved at him. Rain let up, and I went to his vehicle. He says, "Why are you late, and why are you keeping your boss waiting?" Told him to get lost right there. Finished the contracted work within a week, and when he asked me to come back, I told him to get lost again. Next story. I once realized I needed to quit my job when my boss asked me to act natural while pretending to be a customer in our own store, to spy on the employees. Midway through my Oscar-worthy performance of guy browsing cereal, a coworker recognized me and loudly said, "Dude, aren't you on the schedule right now?" My boss doubled down and whispered, "Stay in character." So I did. I walked straight out the front door and never broke character again. Next story. Oh, I got a good one. You ever have a job that's so awful that you wish someone had told you on day one to cut your losses and get out of there? I walk in on the first day to absolute chaos. Every single employee was either in full panic mode or staring into space in a daze. This guy walks up and tells us the manager of that location walked off the job the night before and they had no idea when they'd have someone to train us, then walked away to get a paper and pen to write down our info. Another employee pops into the room I'm waiting in and says, "Get out of here while you can. Do you see this place? It's a mess. There's a reason the boss walked off the job. This is not worth the $15 per hour. I promise you, run." Don't gotta tell me twice. I walked right out before the other guy got back. Thanks, random warehouse dude. Next story. When I was 18, I got a job at Target in the clothing department. I've worked retail before, so I wasn't new to it, but the department lead believed her job was equivalent to being Queen of England. I was also in school, so I'd mostly do closing shifts, which were supposed to end at midnight. One night, near Black Friday, it was almost 2 a.m., and she still wouldn't let me leave. My area for that shift was the men's department, and I had it looking good for open. She comes to do a check on my area and then tells me to switch with her, so I go to where she was, and it's trashed. I remember thinking, what has she been doing since close? So I went to her, told her I finished my original designated area. It's 2 a.m. I have school at 9 a.m. and I'm leaving. She proceeded to throw a fit, throw a whole rack of clothes on the floor, and tell me to pick it up. I just looked at her and left. Called the store manager the next morning, told them everything, and quit over the phone. Next story. Company I was at was going through a very public bankruptcy. I was already looking for jobs at that point. Bank staff came in to assess things for liquidation, and the owner locked them out of the building and made office staff use a back entrance the bank didn't know about. Old building, part of a large office complex attached to other businesses, so it was easy to disappear in the building. He told us not to let the bank in under any circumstance. Called my boss that night and let him know how insanely shady that was, among other things, and that I wouldn't be coming back. Thankfully, he was a cool boss and understood, but the owner was a total douchebag. My boss wound up quitting a few days later as well. It was a mess. I kept getting letters in the mail asking me to submit evidence to a legal team for multiple court cases if I had any. But thankfully, my position was insulated from all of the shady stuff he did, so I didn't have to do anything but disappear. Next story. When my boss brought his daughter to work for me to watch the second time in a month, I was disgusted. I think she was 5 and a little brat. It was an office job, and basically I could get nothing done while watching her. Next story. Worked at place installing windows and windshields. The boss was an alcoholic drug addict. One day he soiled himself in a nonchalant, whoops kind of way. It ran down his leg. He half cleaned it with his soiled pants. I quit the next day. My coworker told me the pants were sitting in a corner over a week later. Next story. Many moons ago, my friend and I joined a family-run business. Day 1. Supervisor sat crying as she couldn't cope. Day 2. The boss walked onto the shop floor and announced we were all lazy. Day 3. No idea, we didn't go back. Next story. A man with a gun stormed the abortion clinic where I was working. Our security guard was an idiot and put him through the metal detector when he first came in, but not after he went outside for a smoke, which was also not allowed. We kept everything out of sight of the patients, and most had no idea anything happened. We finished the day like normal, but everyone in the office acted like it was no big deal and just part of the job. There was no emotional support or even acknowledgement that something scary had happened. I believed in the work we were doing, but when they decided not to fire the security guard, I put in my notice. Next story. I got hired as a file girl. I've been there maybe 2 or 3 days, and I opened the filing cabinet without realizing that it was top-heavy, and that if I was opening the top shelf, I had to open the bottom one as well. The entire filing cabinet fell on me. Took 3 guys to lift it off. I spent the rest of the day cleaning up all the files that fell everywhere and reorganizing them. I then walked into the boss's office and quit on the spot out of sheer embarrassment. Next story. My boss asked another colleague and I to help him kidnap another employee that he'd been obsessing over. The literal plan was, help me get her in the van. He eventually was put in a 72-hour psych evaluation. I didn't realize how much he terrorized her until that point. It came out that he would randomly show up to her house. Next story. Last job I quit. I put in my 2 weeks notice, and then I came in every day and stayed a few hours late to help with the transition. On my last day, I shook some hands, told everyone it was great working with them, handed in my kit, and left. Next story. I had a trial shift at a small cafe when I was a student. Within the first hour of my shift, the 2 other members of staff had a fist fight in the seating area. I ended up getting questioned by police about it. I didn't even know my colleague's name at this point. Not a good first impression of a job. Next story. I once worked as a remote VA for a company. When I discovered they are always hiring, I just knew they are always firing, using people for a short period of work, then coming out with excuse of poor performance to drop them. I quit it after a week. Next story. I was a vet tech and had heard rumors about the veterinarian drinking. I'd been working there for about 2 months when she came in almost blackout drunk and performed a spay on a cat. I quit a week later. She was later arrested for drunk driving, and her blood alcohol level was 0.309 about 5 hours after she crashed her car. Last I knew, she was still practicing. Next story. One of the first jobs I had as an office assistant for a building materials company. I was the only woman and was hired. After the first day, one of the guys comes to pay me cash and I ask why. He said they need a few test days with me and will pay me cash until they decide if they want to hire me. I was never told I wasn't hired or that I was doing a test run. Never went back. Next story. Got hired at 19 to sell Cutco knives. First task was calling everyone in my personal phone contacts. Called my grandma. She bought a set out of pity. Quit the next day. She still has the knives though. They're amazing. Next story. I could talk about Tim the Dim forever, but here are 2 snippets. Worked a shelter specializing in feral and aggressive dogs. Tim was brought in as director. Decided to take the top 6 most aggressive dogs. These are all large, powerful dogs who have killed other dogs and even badly injured people, and let them loose in a garden together to see what happened. That it would have been fine, we stopped this madness obviously, because of the power of positive thinking. Hired the worst, most useless adoption person ever. She was scared of dogs, wouldn't interact with them, just chose them based on pics and made up lies. A lot of our dogs couldn't even be touched. We actually had a negative adoption rate at one point thanks to her. She was caught bringing 2 of the goats into a garden full of dogs to see if the dogs were good with other animals. We begged to have her fired. Tim said she was the best employee the shelter has had, and then fired the 2 most skilled, hardworking, and reliable employees because they had overly negative mindsets. Next story. I worked in audio/visual department at a college. Every damn time I took a day off, my phone would ring for help. The last time it rang, I got another job. The call? Where to plug a aux cable into for a show, even though I'd color-coded everything. Next story. I took a part-time job as kitchen hand in a restaurant while waiting for my new tech job to start. I knew that it's a messy job and have to clean plates and stuff, but I was a bit naive and too nice. So, I did sink cleaning, inventory management, and even scrubbing toilets. One day, I saw the manager of the restaurant toying with food safety and not throwing away expired food. One day an ex-employee came and demanded him to pay for his last week, or pay. I saw the whole argument go down in front of me. The manager didn't want to pay him, and after 1 hour of argument, finally gave him the money and stormed off. I realized he was breaking all sorts of rules and also abusing his employees. I left the very next week as soon as I got my pay. Next story. Got a job very briefly at a place called Mr. Lube. It's a franchise that does minor car stuff like tires and oil changes. One family in particular basically owns all the Mr. Lubes in my city. Within a couple weeks, I experienced just how damn dysfunctional the entire organization was. They hired me under false pretenses. I specifically asked if the job was a sales job. They told me no. Surprise! They told me I needed to upsell if I wanted more hours. They hired me as full-time. I spent 2 months doing part-time while training. Training was bringing coffee and papers to people waiting in line. They then put me to work in a bay knowing absolutely nothing because I wasn't actually trained, then got mad when I wasn't doing things right, and proceeded to tell me I won't be getting full-time till my performance improves. Also, the management was atrocious. The manager of my location wanted to be a friend more than he wanted to be a boss, which made him unreliable. And the assistant store manager was easily one of the biggest idiots I've ever met. Think thinnest chinstrap beard to cover up his absolute lack of jawline. Probably did 1 or 2 soft cycles of steroids to get some muscle then stopped. Probably got bullied as a teenager is my guess. No matter what I did or said to the guy, he was a dick. The entire long-time staff acted like an incestuous family too. Everyone was banging each other, which led to a Christmas party confrontation where the aforementioned assistant store manager, who was completely hammered, attacked another employee, who was out of his mind on MDMA, after he found out the other employee slept with a girl who worked at another location, who he had been sleeping with before she broke it off with him. I finally quit after the manager attempted to write me up for being late to my shift. I was 10 minutes early. He told me employees are required to be dressed and ready to work 15 minutes before their shift, but aren't allowed to clock in. I told him I know for a fact that's illegal. We got into an argument. I said, "Damn this place," and left. Next story. The last company I worked at for 7 years. Of those 7 years, I was sitting overseas for a total of like 4.5 to 5 years. I have kids, had a wife, but divorced during that time due to the constant travel. Finally, halfway through my last assignment and denied any leave to go home and see family since my job changed while there. I just threw in the towel, gave my resignation, and flew back home. I realized I was mentally exhausted and just completely physically drained. Took a sabbatical and relaxed. Got into therapy. Next story. Worked in accounting at a drug rehab place. It was run so poorly, had barely any money, no training, and was filthy. The owners didn't clean a damn thing or have cleaners. It was up to the staff. I started looking for another job pretty soon after starting. Then I caught a therapist using drugs in the bathroom. Told my boss, and he laughed it off. Couldn't get out of there fast enough. I reported them. They're still in business. Next story. Working in a factory and I almost got smoked by an industrial robot. I've worked with industrial robotics for years. There's normally safeguards in place to keep this from happening. Next story. I once showed up to a job interview for a warehouse job wearing a suit and tie. They shoved me in a food truck and had me go door to door with some other guy trying to sell steaks to random houses. After a few hours, I told him to bring me back home or I would call the police and report a kidnapping. That company eventually went out of business. Next story. Got a job at an animal shelter. I lasted 3 whole weeks until people started talking and making jokes about sawing a dog in half later. Big dog, St. Bernard. So it could fit into the crematorium. I thought they were just jokes until they did. Could I work at an animal shelter again? Sure. This was a very run-down place with about 5 whole staff for 40 to 50 animals, with 2 deep freezers full of dead animals. We were working at a breakneck pace for $12 an hour when the shelter had millions, dislocating things because I was trying to work so fast. We were timed on everything, and having to haul dead dogs and cats around in a dimly lit concrete building. I walked out. Next story. Worked at a pizzeria as a delivery driver. The owner started using cocaine and was sending the cook to go get him more. I did my shift, and at the end of the night, the owner said he was short and couldn't pay me my hourly wages. Weird, but okay. Come in the next night, same thing. I had tickets for a basketball game the next day and told him I couldn't work. Went to the game, come home, and my parents tell me he called the house 10 times saying I had to come in. It was an emergency. I call him and say, "You knew I was gone all day. I told you I'm not working today. The game ended. You're home now. I need you. Come in." I told him I'm coming in, but only to get my money for the last 2 nights. I'm not working unless I'm paid in full first. He got mad and hung up the phone. I go down to the place an hour later, walk back into the kitchen, and it looked like a bomb went off. Dishes everywhere. I was the only one who ever did them. Food on the counter. It was a mess. I say, "I'm here to get my money, so where is it?" He loses his mind and is screaming at me. "We needed you. You let me down, etc." I said, "Cool. Well, I'll be back in a couple of hours for my money, and you better have it," and started walking out of the kitchen. I hear a loud thud next to me. I look over and realize that he picked up the fire extinguisher off the wall and threw it at me, but missed. I don't say a word. I just walk out. I go home, tell my parents what happened, and my dad is ready to kill this guy. I told my parents I'm going back in a few hours. My dad tells me he's going with me. I said okay, but stay outside. I walk in, my boss is standing at the register, and I say I'm here, where's my money? He says, "Sorry, I don't have it." I said, "You better pay me right now, or I'll never work here again." I knew after the fire extinguisher being thrown, I'd never set foot in that place again. He laughs and says, "No," but then notices a very angry guy outside through the window. He said, "Who is that guy outside?" I said, "That's my dad. You should probably pay me because I'm not responsible for what he does if you don't." He gave me half of what he owed me from the register because he spent the rest on coke. He then apologized and told me he needed me to work again the next day. I took whatever he gave me, walked out the door, and never went back. He went out of business a few weeks later. Next story. I had just turned 18, and my middle-aged manager kept staring at my butt and commenting to other teens my age and younger about inappropriate things. Also, when I quit, he had a huge tantrum. The guy was super creepy. Next story. I worked as an RN in a psychiatric emergency department for about 7 years. I knew it was time to leave when I found myself in a conversation with a coworker where she asked, "Remember that guy who threatened to kill us and smashed up the desk?" And I found myself casually answering, "Which one?" Burnout came 3 months later, and I'll never work in direct patient care again. Next story. Oh man, how about an actual PC gone mad story? Many years ago, I was working for a company and kept getting turned down for promotion. Couldn't figure out why. I was already basically running my team, had the qualifications, interviews went great. Kept getting passed by. Shoot an email to my director asking for a meeting so we can talk about it. She sets it up and says she's looped in HR. I go to the meeting and my director says she has no problem with me. I do outstanding work, leadership, and then says, "If it were up to me, I'd promote you right now." This is Bob from HR. Bob launches into how we have employee network groups, and one of the things they look at for promotion is ENG engagement score, which is basically just a running average of how many ENG meetings/events you've participated in. They said that since mine was 0, I wasn't eligible for promotion and wouldn't be until I averaged 4 year. I took the list, read it, handed it back to him, and asked, "Which group would you suggest I attend?" As you can imagine, the list was all employee group. None of those adjectives were white, male, or straight, or anything else that applied to me. He looked at the list, looked at me, looked at the list, looked at me, and said, "Oh, Ian? No." Next day, director flagged me down and said, "I understand if you want to leave. Let me know. I've already started a letter of reference for you, and I have some names of people you should call." And yeah, that little conversation with HR was lawsuit worthy, but I had no real interest in staying and moved on. Fast forward a year, and my entire team had also left, and 2 were working for me at a different company. Next story. Worked at a factory where parts were stamped out of metal. Started on a station where I controlled the press with my foot. No issue. Then I got sent to a station with 12 other people where the machine did most of the work. We all just pulled off 2 parts each after the press/cutter raised out of our way. I had 0 control of it. Step forward 1, 2, pick up parts, step back. 1, 2, drop. Left hand in bin, drop. Right hand in bin, wait. 3, 4, then step forward. 1, 2. This timing repeated hundreds of times during a shift, and it was pure misery. After 2 hours or so, instead of waiting for the 3, 4 count, I stepped forward. 1, 2, put my hands under the press as it was coming down. The top of what was essentially the piston holding the molds was pressing down, and I felt my hair being pushed against my head. That sensation snapped me out of it. I quickly snapped my head forward and somehow managed to jump back despite being off-balanced. Everyone was looking at me in horror, finished the run, and had to fight to keep my mind from wandering, and told the boss that the job wasn't for me, that I was putting in my 2 weeks, but that I wouldn't be working on any machine that wasn't solo, and that I didn't control myself. Damn scared me. Bonus story. My dad had briefly worked at a forge as maintenance. An extruding machine broke down and they shut it off. Rather than shut the machine down for a week so that it would get to something approaching room temperature, they only waited a day. He couldn't crawl into the machine because it was too hot. He had to crouch and stay on his feet and basically shuffle down a tunnel inside the machine. He was told not to fall or pass out because they wouldn't be able to get him out. Said that the heat was unimaginable, that sweat was pouring off of him and sizzling when it hit the ground. After he fixed the extruder and cooled off, he noticed that a mole on his arm felt odd. He went to scratch it, and it just disintegrated. He talked to my mom that night, and despite them being desperate for money, she talked him into quitting and to never set foot on the factory floor again for anything. Told him to drop the gear off at the office the next day and to quit without notice. She was worried that they'd talk him into doing something dangerous if he gave his 2 weeks. Next story. I was hired as a junior programmer through a temp agency. First day, I drive out to the address they gave me, and it's a boarded-up restaurant. I double-check the address, then call the agency like, "What the heck?" They call me back 2 minutes later. "Nope, you're in the right place. The manager is on his way to greet you." I'm standing there when the boarded-up door opens, and a guy waves me in. Inside, the place is filthy. There are plates on the counter, and chairs set up like it's still in service, but everything is covered in dust. He takes me to the back, down a hallway, and into a dark room, where about 6 guys my age are hunched over computers. The only light in the room is from their monitors. No one acknowledges me. He shows me my cubicle, then tells me to move my car and hide it behind the building so it's not visible from the road. That was it for me. I go outside, look at where the other cars are parked, in tall grass on a slope behind the building, sit there for a second, and just drive away. The temp agency called me like 20 times on the way home. I never picked up. Next story. I made a tiny mistake at work due to a miscommunication. My boss's boss referenced it for 2 weeks after. She made jokes about me and negative comments about me. This was during meetings and in front of my colleagues and subordinates. I can take a joke, but the timeline of 2 weeks for a small mistake was excessive. She was very close friends with my boss. He never once had my back or told her to ease off. She did it a final time, so I emailed her and said, "I understand that this mistake was an issue, and I will ensure it doesn't happen again." She picked the phone up and called me and said, "You need to get over this. Lady, the mistake was 2 weeks ago. You get over it." I got a new job 14 days later. When I quit, her mouth was as big as an airline hangar. Next story. 5th grader tried to hit me. I protected myself by shutting the classroom door and holding it shut, with her in the classroom and me in the hallway. Classroom was empty. Everyone went to PE and she was refusing to go. Principal walked by, asked what was going on. I am literally holding the door shut as I inform him. He looks through the window, waves at the student, and says, "Yep, she's a wild one," and continues walking down the hall. I did not return the next day or any day after. Next story. Super high stressful job and was the only one on call 24 hours, 7 days a week. Finally fell out and had a grand mal seizure and broke my foot in the middle of the warehouse. The owner came back from lunch after I was carried off in an ambulance and had the damn nerve to ask if I was coming back tomorrow. I knew right then that I had to get out, but had to hold out until after I had surgery on my broken foot for the insurance. I gave my 2 weeks, but never came back after 1. Craziest job experience of my life. Next story. I work at an outdoor beer garden in a tropical climate. It's not air-conditioned, and with the heat of the fryer regularly gets up to 100 degrees. My boss has a rule that you can't have any drinks in the kitchen, because one time she saw someone pour the last of a bottle into their personal drink. So now you have to go next door to drink water. I confronted her multiple times about it, citing it as being a safety hazard, and told her I was getting leg cramps, migraines, and even a UTI. She said it's standard practice for bars to disallow any kind of drinks behind the bar. I learned that not only is it not standard practice, it's illegal, via Labor Board and OSHA. I also learned that she's illegally classifying me as a 1099 independent contractor, so that she doesn't have to pay as many taxes or provide me with the legally required benefits of an employee. I found this out a week and a half ago. Started looking for jobs. Had a series of 3 interviews at a great place yesterday, and I have a practical interview behind a bar in a few hours. I'm really freaking nervous and trying to get my mind off of it via Reddit RN. As soon as I get a new job, I'm reporting her to the IRS and the local labor board. Next story. Walked into one of these orientations at 19. Dude was wearing a suit from 2003 and kept saying 6 figures, like it was a magic spell. I drove home in silence. Next story. I knew I needed to get out right when I got in, and it was only 2 weeks, luckily. The guy gave me a 30-minute heads up to the first interview and then gave me crap about wearing shorts to it in 90-degree weather. I wore a skirt to the next one, and he had me twirl for him, not even joking. I never signed any paperwork. It was a serving position at a bar he was opening. I swear this guy was a cokehead, and he caught wind of a football game, so decided the place needed to open that day. So me and a group of people just opened the doors and started just serving people. It was so weird. No training, no direction. He got me confused with another server with the same name and thought we were one person, and screamed at me for missing a meeting he had only told her about. We had been writing our clock-in times on a sheet of paper, and when I quit and asked for my pay, he asked me, "How many hours did you work?" I balked. Apparently their accountant had lost them, so I came up with a number, he came up with a slightly smaller one, and I said, "Whatever, it's fine." And this motherfucker pulls out his wallet and just counts the cash from there. The cherry on top is I told my boyfriend at the time all of this and said, "Whatever you do, don't get a job there." Like he took it as a damn challenge. He, of course, got a job there. Addicts stick together, I guess. The place got shut down like a year and a half later, for tax reasons apparently. Next story. Cleaning job at a college campus. Assigned a building and cleaned it the first night and had to call a supervisor for the last room as it had a special lock and alarm that the supervisor had to disable. They come, turn it off, and let me in. It was like a small lobby with a door and viewing window to an adjoining room. It was a medical cadaver room. That was my first and last day. Next story. Not me, but I dated a guy a long time ago that fell for one of those vacuum sales job advertisements. He went through with it for a week or so before I found horror stories on Reddit about the company and convinced him to quit. It only took a week for his own horror story to take place. The trainer made him train by pitching to family members. The trainer tricked my ex's very elderly grandma into buying a vacuum when my ex was busy loading the vehicle back up with their products after a training demo at her house. The trainer had won a vacuum from the company and was trying to offload it to someone vulnerable. He told her it would help her grandson if she bought a vacuum right then and there. Problem was, she wasn't buying a vacuum from the company and helping her grandson at all. She was tricked into writing a personal check in the trainer's name and everything. We thankfully caught and resolved it. Next story. Some days ago, I asked for vacation so I could travel with my girlfriend to visit her family that lives in other country. Instead of discussing dates, my boss started asking me why I needed a vacation. Then, when I explained the reason, he grinned and said, "Why are you adjusting your plans for her? She should be adjusting hers for you." We agreed on vacation later, but I feel like I'm working for a man stuck in another century. I will look for a new job after the vacation. Next story. In high school, I got a job at a local gyro restaurant at the mall food court. My first day, boss told me he was going to withhold my pay for 2 weeks to make sure I would stick with the place. Then he would pay me back everything held. I was sure that was illegal, but wasn't going to rock the boat yet. Then that same day, I found out every other employee, even ones who had been there for months, was on the verge of quitting before I got there. Finally, while mopping the floors, the boss had me mop the backroom floors with some very strong bleach. He insisted that ammonia was in the bleach cleaner, but I never saw any evidence of that. It was super strong, enough to make me and all of the other employees clear the back rooms. He laughed and announced we weren't strong enough to make it in his company. I just decided this wasn't a good guy to work for. I didn't go back. Ever. A bunch of other employees quit that same weekend. His restaurant folded soon after. Good riddance.